Shamilo Chinlal, your host on Speak Your Mind, and I'd like to welcome you on this special episode titled Domestic Violence Against Women. I have with me Wilma Eileen. Welcome on the show, Wilma. Wilma, you are the regional administrator with Fiji Women's Crisis Center.
Right.
And I have the pleasure of having Clement Ndari.
Thank you.
And you are a male advocate.
Yes, ma'am.
You're spreading the good news on advocating violence against women.
Yes.
That's a wonderful thing you're doing,
Thank you so much. Sir.
Clement. So I think we should give Clement to start and to especially thank him for coming on the show. It takes guts to come and talk on topics like this, because I was reading a finding by the Fiji Women's Crisis Center. It is here with me. It says that domestic violence is one of the biggest risks to women's physical health and mental well-being. In Fiji today, more women, see what caught my attention was that more women are affected by domestic violence than by diabetes, high blood pressure and hypertension, the NCDs. And that's quite an interesting finding. So we'll talk about that. Clement, tell me something. You work with Ministry of Women, right? But you are advocating on violence against women. What inspired you to do that? What motivated you to do this?
Thank you, Sam. First of all, say Mbulavinak to everybody listening and watching. And I think it's a privilege to be here. And I thank you for the invitation as well. I think domestic violence is a very big issue in our country. And it warrants a prompt response from all sectors of the community. I'm here as a male advocate who has been trained with the Fiji Women Crisis Center, like other men who have also attended the training. But I'm very thankful to the center for inviting me to be part of the program.
Let's be honest here, right?
Yes.
When people hear the word Fiji Women's Crisis Center, it repels. Most men find it a bit annoying. For them, it's saying they are just for women. They are just helping women and not men and not a marriage. That's what people talk. I mean, that's the reality. But otherwise, Fiji Women's Crisis Center has been doing a great job creating awareness on violence against women. What made you to go forward and to get trained on this, especially with Fiji Women's Crisis Center?
Okay, Sam, I'll just share with you some of the experiences that I've. We were a number of welfare officers. These years we were asked to attend a training conducted by the Fiji Women Crisis Center. So welfare officers attended. And when we attended this training, it was something new to us. It was on domestic violence, women's rights. And what actually promoted me to be part of this training is that I believe that we can make a change.
Mm-hmm.
I would like it to have something new for my family, for my wife, for my daughter, for my nieces, mothers and grandmothers and aunties. They need that environment. That is something that pushed me to go forward and learn what is domestic violence, what can be done to prevent it. And then we were trained as male advocates.
So were you duty bound to attend this, or you just said to yourself, no, I'm interested, I want to go and learn?
Yes, once you are in that training, it's a reflection of my behavior. And said, okay, I can make a difference.
Right.
And that's what actually promoted me to move and become a male advocate and share with other men and say, domestic violence is not a language of love.
So Wilma, this workshop was hosted by Fiji Women's Crisis Center. How do you reach out to work with men? Is it quite difficult
No,
to get them on board?
For Clement's situation, they were called in. So these men undergo 4 stages of training where they unpack. It's all about domestic violence. Is all about the power and control in a relationship. So we're looking, of course, domestic violence is any violence that happens in the home, but specifically we'll be looking at a husband and wife relationship. So these male advocates, these men undergo this first stage of a training where they go through the whole genderization process, where, you know, how little girls and boys, when they grow up in society, we have different expectations for the boys and different expectations for the girls. For example, a boy growing up, we teach the boy to be tough, you know, not to show any emotions. So, for example, if a little boy falls and starts crying, you know, what's our immediate response to that little boy?
Oh, you're a girl. Why are you crying? You're not a
Boys
girl.
don't cry. Boys
Yeah,
don't cry.
exactly.
Yes.
And then the girls, we're expected, she's expected to stay home and do all the house chores, to cook and to cater for the men. So then, you know, these men undergo all these trainings, and you get to see the dynamics in terms of power and control. So then that whole socialization process where the child, all the children are taught this is how you're to behave as a boy and as a girl. So then this goes out into, you know, they start to internalize it. So through this training, the men are go through this training to change their mindset on how they were brought up as little boys and girls, to show women that, hey, you know, you're just as equal as me. Women also have opportunities. They can make choices for themselves. So it's all about, you know, this whole unpacking of their the way they were brought up into a new mindset
Yes.
altogether.
So, Clement, when you did attend this workshop, which was when? How long was this? How long ago was this?
I think with the first workshop that we attended as a male, the first male advocate training was back in 2002.
Right.
And gradually we had a number of workshops in between.
What was your experience during the workshop? Were you convinced with what was a part of the workshop and how they talked about women need equal chances, etc.? We're going to talk about this experience soon after a break. So do stay with us on Speak Your Mind. And you're most welcome to call us and discuss and join the discussion on 3220-906 and 3220-907 on Speak Your Mind. Welcome back on Speak Your Mind, and I'm talking to Wilma, who's from Fiji Women's Crisis Center, and Clement, who's a male advocate on domestic violence against women. So my question was, when you were part of this training with Fiji Women's Crisis Center, were you trained by the coordinator who is a woman, and they're all men sitting, and normally it's a bit uncomfortable for men to receive teaching from women.
Yes.
What was your experience about when you entered the workshop? Were you all open, or you had a few walls around that, and did it take long to break the walls? Tell me about that.
I think, Shem, when we went in, it's just like a traditional man walks in with those walls that you just stated, that the control is with men. You were instructed to do that. And when we were part of the workshop, with the number of figures presented to us and the kind of the degree of abuse that has been given to women and girls, when we sat there, then we see this is the reality of what is happening. And the figure says the most perpetrators were men. It questioned our internal being. What can we do to make changes? And for me personally, I was convinced. It was a rebaptism again to me. And that I think, I should do something about it. And doing something about it is simply talking to your friend, talking to your workmate, and just influence them and say, violence is not a language of love, because it involves your sister, it involves your mother, everybody that you cares about. I was led to, when I was sitting there, I was led to believe, I cannot see my daughter being a punching back to another man. Then the change should start with me before I go out. So actually, Shyam, I was convinced I was maybe rebaptized again.
Yeah.
And I love this work. It's part of passion of helping other men to make a right decision.
It's very encouraging what Clement said, that you don't want your daughters to be a punching bag.
Yes, definitely.
No parent would want that.
Definitely,
no mother,
yes.
no one would want that. Can I ask a question? We'd like to hear from the horse's mouth, from the man's mouth. What incites a man to cause harm, because it's the woman who's at the receiving end, the violence. Why do men do that? Are they under some kind of pressure? What causes? What incites them to treat women that way?
There's always, when violence is done, there's always something to do with power. Somebody is more powerful and somebody is more weaker, because the weaker one cannot defend. So, it is a lot of contribution to that.
Yes.
So it's something to say, I'm a man, I need to control. And those are some of the contributing parts. I think it's to do with power.
Yes.
Yeah.
So are you happy with the kind of training that Fiji Women's Crisis Center holds for men, to train them as male advocates? Do you like the approach? What do you like about that, the training?
Yeah, the training it's beneficial to men, because one, it recognizes men's role, what men can do, and even men identifying what may have been the trigger for them to get angry, for them to unable to control themselves. Even some have no idea what is happening within.
Yes.
So when we go to this kind of training, it's like a reflection session. What happens to you? What presses that button? And you'll be able to have that control within you.
Yes.
There is some beneficial about the training that male advocacy.
So,
can
Wilma,
offer.
when you have this kind of trainings with men, trying to train men to help the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, and I'm so glad that you do that, because most people think that Fiji Women's Crisis Center works in isolation. They only work with women and they make men their enemy. But here you are working with men, and you're training them to be a helping hand. So when you do have all these male advocates graduate from this workshop, how do you then work with them?
Okay, let me just give you a little bit of information before I go into that. So when you're talking about men's behavior, they need to we find that men are uncomfortable in the workshop because you're talking about their violent behavior towards the women in their lives. So it's uncomfortable, and it's so that's what we're saying. We're trying to change their mindset so that when they see women, they start to respond sensitively, appropriately, and acknowledge them and respect them. So what the men go through is the 4 stages of training. You can have the physical violence. You can stop the physical violence, but there's other forms of violence, like the coercive control. Coercive control is, for example, when there's a function and the wife is dancing and everyone's having fun, etc., and then she looks at her husband and then he gives her this look. Yeah, so immediately she knows, I have to sit down, otherwise there'll be consequences. There's other forms of violence too, where he controls the finances. For example, she's raking the money in, bringing it in, but at the end of the day, she only has just enough money maybe for her bus fare, and he's in control of that whole financial, her whole pay packet. Yeah. So when men go through the male advocacy training, it's to do with changing the respecting women and realizing that women, of course, have rights and choices to make for themselves. And I'll talk about a little bit more on, domestic violence, the difference between an argument and domestic violence. An argument is where a husband is able to talk to the wife and give his opinions, etc., and where the wife is able to express also her opinion, her thoughts, etc.
So it is good to argue on a point, right? But it should not come to the extent of getting angry and hitting someone.
Yeah.
Argument is healthy.
Argument
but
is
how
healthy.
you argue is another way. Argument is a healthy, like for an example, when we are talking and there could be a subject and we argue on that subject, the outcome
Definitely.
should be good always.
Yeah.
And it's always good to agree to disagree.
Yes,
But
definitely.
domestic violence, on the other hand, is where the husband is talking to the wife and she's feeling fearful, she's feeling threatened, under fear, threat, and coercion. So that's the difference when we're talking about an argument and domestic violence.
So Clement, is it the culture which is dominant, which causes all these things? And
One can say that, but to me, Shem, from my reflection, I would like to share this because other men listening to me would also have some form of experience as well. Like in men, like it's proving, proving in terms of if I feel emotional, I don't show it because I'm a man, And
what do you feel? You do feel like showing
You
emotions,
don't show it, but
but you're afraid.
Kind of afraid, kind of like you do, you know, they call it in mandua, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you don't show it, you try to hide it. And also that, when we have those personal protection, that I'm a man, that I can, I control, I should be strong. But there's no harm in a man said, I'm also emotional,
Yes.
And then we have those kind of things, what we call pressure cooker. You
Yes.
bottle all the anger inside and it bottles. But there are ways that men can find.
Definitely.
Yeah.
We'll take a break
Yeah.
and we'll talk how can a woman help a man, because it has to be working together, right? And I'd like to ask something very interesting with Clement now that he's a male advocate. When he goes out to men to tell them and advocate against domestic violence, you get looked down, or do you say, hey, come on, man, be a man. What are you doing? So we'll discuss more. And after this, we'll be talking to the author of the book Cultural Prison, A Daughter's Worth, which actually inspired us to host this talk back today on domestic violence. So we'll be right back after this break. You're listening to Speak Your Mind on Gold FM, a weekly talkback show where we discuss interesting topics and issues. So, Clement, when you do go and talk to men or talk about be nice to a woman, don't hit a woman, what kind of reaction do you get from male community?
Well, Shem, I know that this subject, when you talk to men, before, let's say before, it's about 6-7 years ago, when you bring this topic to the man peers group, now you can get response of people laughed at you, But I believe there's a bit of change where we talk about domestic violence issues and you present them the figures and all the evidence that is in place. You can hear there's a drop of silence in the house or in the hall, where it actually there's a communication there where the information has been transiting.
Yes.
And those are some of the success when we continuously, consistently of being advocating. Yeah.
Have you seen a breakthrough in your work? Have you seen some good results?
Yes, definitely. Yes, I think one is evident enough. We can see a lot of men doing the same thing as well. We can see even the church leaders are even being trained. We have some groups have already been set up as well. For example, the Anglican Church in Fiji, the church has been committed and saying there's no domestic violence throughout the church, and all the church leaders need to attend all this training conducted by the Fiji Women Crisis. So they are being educated and learn, what is domestic violence, what causes, and how we can help each other.
Yes, good. So, Wilma,
Can I just also
yes, please.
contribute? So we've had a lot of success stories coming up from the men themselves after undergoing this training with our coordinator, and it's good to hear the wives telling the coordinator, or the crisis center, how her husband has changed because of the training. So these are some of stories or evidence that we can say the male advocacy or men out there are also coming on board and trying to change their behavior.
And definitely we are working towards making Fiji a healthy nation.
Yes.
And it can only become a healthy country and a nation if the people are healthy, the couples are healthy.
Healthy and happy, and
Yeah.
where there's no
Exactly.
violence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Healthy as in relationship of what God commanded us,
Yes.
right? Having the reverence for each other, treating each other equally and not overpowering or controlling each other. So then there is a lot of peace. Wilma, Women's Crisis Center did a national research on women's health and life experience in Fiji. This was a recent one, right? In 2010 and 2011. So here it says you did a research on how frequently are women hit and how severe is physical violence by husbands and partners. Would you like to talk about this?
Okay. Domestic violence is not just a slap. A slap is, it affects the woman physically and emotionally too. So, we've had a lot of cases where women have been, slapped, punched, kicked, etc. And then you have the emotional abuse where she's constantly said, well, of course, if she goes through physical violence, verbal violence, the emotional violence will also definitely come up. So what we did was the survey. And effect of domestic violence is, the woman loses her job, death also happens, low self-esteem for the woman, she's got low self-confidence, etc., etc. And we've had horrible cases where women are beaten up by 4x4 timber and with iron rods and stuff like that, and women have had their wombs ripped by the husband. So those are some of the
Can I talk about is it mostly in central divisions as we speak, or you get reports from all over Fiji and then you collate? Which area of Fiji is most inflicted with this?
Well, we did the study, and we found that everywhere, women do go through experience.
These are most educated men and women as well?
Yes, we've had victim survivors who are lawyers, whose husbands are bank officers, managers, etc. So what we found out in this research is people who are away from service providers, they do not report or do not have access to these service providers, and we need to move out there, especially into the Eastern Division. So that's one of our targets, where we move out into the Eastern Division, because everyone needs to know about the issues of violence against women. So with our male advocacy program, we do the women first.
Okay,
because the women need to know their rights first and know that violence against women is wrong, and then we do the men so that they're...
Yeah, in this research, it shows that 94%, when you did this research in 2010, 2011, I don't know if much has changed, it says that 94% were slapped or had something thrown at them. So, Clement, you're a man.
Yeah.
Do you think a man has the right to slap a woman if he's angry?
Shem, our laws in the county says that physical assault is prohibited. So if the law says you're not allowed to hit anybody, and it's wrong, it's illegal, any sort, whether you use an object or what, because it's termed illegal in our law framework. Yeah. But I think just to add more to what Wilma is sharing, when it comes to male advocacy, when we got to the community, one important thing that the male advocates had to share is not their own experience, but looking at it from the perspective of the victims of domestic violence. So the women organization, they take the lead role. We share with the other men what other woman has gone through. That is a very important point, because men can understand. So it's like myself putting myself into that lady's shoes, how she felt, those emotional, So because when you share it with other men, that men can realize, no, I did this and this what happened. But as far as those physical assault, the law says it's illegal, then it's...
Yes, because most of the findings through this research was 94% women were slapped, 68 were hit with an object, 60% were pushed, so there is some kind of violence, 44 were kicked, 20% were assaulted with a weapon, 10% were choked. So if you see 100% women are being abused, they've been hit. They've been hit, right? So we'll take a short break, and after that we'll want to know that after that research and the amount of advocating we are doing, the amount of awareness program we continue to carry through these kind of toolback shows, has there been any good results or a remarkable progress in this area? We'll take a short break, and please do call us. I'm sure you're sitting at home and you're thinking a lot, so if this program incites you and motivates you to call for action and say, hey, we should be teaching our women and our daughters and our children as well in this manner. Do call us on 3220906 and 3220907. Welcome back on Speak Your Mind. I'm Shami, your host on Speak Your Mind, and I have with me Clement Dari from a male advocate on domestic on violence against women, and Wilma Eileen, who's with Fiji Women's Crisis Center, a regional administration officer. So let's talk about the progress which Women's Crisis Center has made in trying to create awareness and bring this violence against women to a minimum level. Hopefully, has that worked?
So yes, we do a lot of workshops. We do community education, not with also with students, primary school students, secondary, tertiary. We've done, like what Clement said, we've done male advocacy trainings for different ministerial departments, and we work closely with the Fiji government. Just want to let you know that the Fiji Women's Crisis Center is doing the domestic violence free helpline with the Ministry of
Ministry of Women.
Ministry of Women. So that's another thing. We work closely with government, and of course the research that we've been talking about. A lot of government agencies have been using our statistics. And just to give you a little bit more about the statistics in terms of violence against women, so we did this research in 2010, 2011, and what we found out is that 64% of women in Fiji have undergone physical and or sexual violence in their lifetime. So to break it down even further, 61% experienced physical violence, which is around more than 3 in 5 women in Fiji. Yeah, and then we have 58% of women in their lifetime have experienced sexual violence. And to break it down even further, it's like 1 in 3 women. Yeah. So and then 34% of women have experienced the sexual violence in their lifetime. Break it down further, 1 in 3, and then you have the emotional violence, 58%. And to break it down even further, it's about 3 in 5 women. So you can imagine 3 in 5 women going through emotional violence,
It's a lot
3 in
of-
5
yes.
going through physical, and then you have 1 in 3 going through sexual
So
abuse.
this research is titled "Somebody's Life, Everybody's Business."
Exactly.
I'd like us to get a hold of this book and read. It will be amazing. You'll get a great revelation out of this. It's going to be so helpful. How can I support a friend or family member who is experiencing domestic violence?
Okay, so what you can do is believe in the woman. It is never ever her fault that she's gone through these different forms of violence, and to support her, you can always refer her to the crisis center, to other service providers, and also the toll-free helpline 1560. You know, a lot of women, you can have access to that. And just support her in whatever. And you know, this title, Somebody's Life, Everybody's Business, we've had cases where neighbors have heard the husband and wife fighting, you know, over and over, and then they do nothing about
That's
it.
right.
Then the next morning you wake up and the woman is dead. Or sometimes the man, after he kills the wife, he also commits suicide.
So how can someone support a neighbor who is experiencing domestic
Call
violence?
the police. You don't need to give your details or personal information. You just call the police and tell them this is what's happening. You know, the woman is experiencing violence. You know, just give the physical address, etc., etc.
So what is the helpline that you have?
1560.
So if someone is, you know, at the spur of the moment, maybe that person is not able to call the police. Normally we call the police. The first thing is reaction is to call. But if they happen to call the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, is there anyone on helpline 24 hours to help?
Yes, we have trained counselors at the end of the line, and the crisis center also have their. We also have our 24-hour line, which is 3313-300. We have branches all over the country. We have one in Nandi, Ba, Lambasa, and Raki.
So there are a lot of women who are victims of this, right? Violence. It is happening. How can the society help? How can the family? Because there are some in our culture, Fijian culture. Most of them live with extended families, mother-in-laws, and etc. How can the family and society at large help in this situation? What can we do?
Well, Shem, I think, when you live in the community, there's a saying that it takes a child to grow, and the community is responsible. You ask the question, what can the community do? Say, for instance, if there's a fire, the community response. The community response can be similar to when there's a case of domestic violence. The eagerness to go and help, like Wilma has been sharing with us. I think with the wide coverage of FWCC has done a numerous number of community awareness training of leaders, male advocacy throughout the country. I think there's somebody there in the community, somebody that is listening now. They know, yes, I know what I can do. I can play that role,
and break the cultural
Yeah.
barriers, which has been a stronghold over the years, that because you're a woman, so you shouldn't be speaking too much, or if a woman has been vocal, as in for argument sake, then telling her she deserved it, she deserved a slap, or she deserved being hit by the husband. I think we need to think what we are saying, and not make such comments, because it only incites, and over the years we are sort of passing on the message to the other
Definitely, yes.
generation.
Because while we were growing up, you know, as girls, you're taught not to have a voice. Yeah. So then, when you're brought up in that way, then you start to internalize. You start to believe that I don't have a voice. But when you see a woman out there who's empowered and speaking out, that's the response that a community will give back to her. Oh, she's talking too much, but you too have
Yes.
the, you know, you can express yourself.
You can.
Yeah.
And there are women, Fiji Women's Crisis Center must have come across women who are being badly bashed, and they're hit most of the time. And it's a severe case of violence. Why don't they leave this person? Why are they still in that relationship?
Okay. Why women don't leave a violent relationship? There's many reasons. You know, when you're talking about violence against women or domestic violence, you need to look at the whole dynamics of that violent relationship. So one of the reasons women don't leave is because they still love their husband. Yeah, they just want the violence to stop. Sometimes she might have 5 children. Where will she go to with her 5 children?
Yeah.
Yeah, and if she goes back to her family, sometimes families tell her, "You go back to your husband." They use the religious
Religious fear, I mean,
Yes.
because it's mostly driven around fear.
Yeah, so go back to your husband, remember your marital vows.
Yes.
But then she's going back into this violent relationship. So if she goes back into this violent relationship, then what happens? Or because domestic violence, a woman goes through has low self-esteem, self-confidence, so she thinks that maybe her decision to move out will not be a good one, so she stays. And financially, if she moves out, who will cater for her and her children if they're going to school, all the other expenses, etc.
Yeah. Clement, what would be a message, a good, healthy message to our men who are our support? We look up to them.
Yeah, I think Shem, to get men to be involved, that's the most important one. But I need for men to do this, men need to learn and unlearn what has been with them for those years, because it's entrenched. It's been part of their life. So when they come and learn about what needs to be done, they'll be able to unlearn. They'll unlearn exactly like like if you feel emotional. Men is emotional as well.
Absolutely.
When men learns that, now there is a possibility, or there's a way forward that men can say no to violence to women.
Definitely. Thank you
Yeah.
very much, Clement. And I like the way you kept addressing me as Sham. That's
Yeah.
my nickname. Most of them say. So you're feeling very comfortable
yes.
with 2 women.
Yeah, definitely.
You're doing a great job, Clement,
Thank
and being an advocate to stand with women. That's how God created us, to be a helper for each other. And I pray that you'll continue to break more walls and boundaries.
Yeah.
And, when we meet again, we'll see some excellent results. And Clement has been a great witness and a testimony to help put families together. And thank you, Wilma, for being on the show. Thank you very much. After another break, I'm going to talk to or introduce you to this wonderful lady who inspired us to carry this topic today, to talk about this. We normally talk about domestic violence, but we're going to take another angle of domestic violence. So do stay with me to conclude the show after our next break. Welcome back on Speak Your Mind. Her first book is titled Cultural Prison, A Daughter's Worth. And this is the book. It's about arranged marriage. It's about violence a girl goes through after marriage and how she is treated by her husband and her mother-in-law. And Vindu is here to talk about her book. Welcome on the show, Vindu. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks, Shami.
And you're accompanied by your husband, Ambika Maharaji. Welcome on the tour
Thank
back,
you.
Ambika ji.
Good evening, thank you.
Vindu, you wrote this book. It's called Cultural Prison, A Daughter's Worth. And we said, why don't we then start talking about domestic violence, violence against women and children, which is why we are here to talk about this show and this talkback show. So one of the central character is Deepak in your book. I'm not going to disclose a lot because I want people to read this book. The guy who ill-treats his wife incited by his mother-in-law.
That's correct, yes.
Right. Didn't you feel anxious about writing from a point of a man?
That was quite difficult, and I didn't know how men would react to that story. Basically, not being politically correct and not trying to, put a cotton wool around that. I really wanted it to be very raw. And I just wanted to explain from a man's point of view, how they get influenced by their mothers to do this, because in the end, they don't really want to do it, but sometimes the influences of family.
Did you get help from your husband, Ambikaji?
Not in that.
When it came to talk about Deepak's character? No?
Not at all, actually. I didn't let him read my book at all for at least, a month or two before I was already, in quite a few chapters through the book. And one day I let him read it. So it was, I think I was feeling a bit nervous about who is going to read it.
So Ambikaji, when you read that book, what was your reaction? What was your feeling? How did you like the book?
Well, to be honest, I'm one who's there for gender equality. And when I started reading her book, there are a lot of things in the print in there that actually exposes, makes the awareness of what's happening against women. Cruelty against women is now. And once she started putting in writing, I really liked it, and I'm support for that.
Excellent. Vindu, tell me your feelings about Saras, the bride and the daughter-in-law in your book.
That girl is absolutely a beautiful girl. She's come from a beautiful family. She's been, she's now working in a banking environment. She's got a career ahead of her. Absolutely beautiful to look at. But then culture takes over, and she is then put into a cultural prison because her parents are arranging her marriage. They expect her to continue to work, obviously, and they think that Deepak, being an educated person himself, as a couple, they would make a very dynamic couple. But things changed for her.
Vindu, you left Fiji in the 1980s, I think, right?
1985.
1985.
Yes.
And you've been living in Sydney, Australia for a while, both of you. So
Yes.
do you still think that the Fijians of Indian descent abroad and in Fiji are still in this cultural prison?
They definitely are. I am actually quite shocked at that. I thought that we had come a long way. I mean, this is 2017. And even in Sydney, where I live, Brisbane, like around Australia, Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney, which is the main cities. And everywhere I go, I seem to, once my book came out, I had people telling me stories about how the Indian descent Fijians are still taking that old school cultural stuff overseas and living that. When I've come back to Fiji on a number of occasions, I've noticed that Fiji is actually getting better. It's advanced, but the people of Fiji that have left are actually holding on to 1970s and 1980s.
Yes, because
things.
we are now seeing a new Fiji where there's a diverse of
Definitely.
culture, and we are embracing each other's culture.
Yes.
Vindu, tell me something. Who should read this book, Cultural Prison: A Daughter's Worth?
First of all, I think all women should read this, regardless of whether you are, you're a career woman and you don't have, you're not in a violent situation, you're in a happy marriage. I think you should read it because it'll give you an insight of what others are going through. I think we're very quick to judge women that are going through a cultural, sort of like a domestic violence situation. The other people would be the men in their lives. I think that school children from the age of about 14 onwards should definitely read the book because that's when change can happen. If young people are reading it, change can definitely happen.
It's a wonderful book. I read this book when Ambikaji told me that, Shami, you should read this book because once you get hold of it, you won't be able to put it down. So I read this book, and I was like, I had different emotions as I read. I felt very angry with the mother-in-law. Why is she treating her daughter-in-law like that? Not helping the son too, inciting and all that. Now tell me, when you're writing this book, or you are an author, you love writing books, so does writing energize or exhaust you?
Actually, both. It does energize me a lot more. It is exhausting work, but definitely now that I've finished this, I'm on to the next one, because it's just giving me that insight of what more I can do. I feel that I've done something good here. At the time when I was writing it, I didn't know who was going to read it. I thought it'll be probably a book I've written and put on the shelf and about 20 people reading it. But it's getting out there. and,
Definitely.
yeah.
So, Mikaji, your wife is going to get very busy. She is a qualified author and a very successful one already.
Yep.
Being a husband, would you want to see her work, or she being more committed to writing books? Would you be the kind of husband would want to support her or nag her? Ki, you're not doing the dishes, you're not doing the house. Going back to what the story is about.
Definitely. Actually, I support her what she's doing. That particular book took 2 years to write. Within 2 years, we shared a lot of responsibilities. We had other people helping us as well. So moving forward, I would say, yep, I'm there for her, and I'll encourage her to write another one as soon as she can.
Because we are each other's strength, and I think, Vindu, you have been very successful to be able to write this book because of your husband Ambika, who has supported you 100%,
Yeah, definitely.
and you have been a great inspiration. Otherwise, a woman who herself is in a cultural prison of this will never ever be able to write a book. There will be a lot of fears surrounded by that.
A lot of
So
fears,
this
yeah.
book is available in Fiji bookstores, and I think it will be marketed abroad as well.
That's correct. It's going to be distributed by USB Book Center, and it's going to go abroad as well.
Thank you, Vinduji, for taking such courage and writing. You could have written any book, any romantic Mills and Boon novel, whatever, but you wrote a great book. So that speaks volumes. And if someone is wanting to talk to Vindu and to make it into a documentary or a movie, I think you should approach her while she's in Fiji. So thank you very much, Vindu and Amikaji, for coming on the show. Remember, let's come out of our prison, cultural prison. Women are to be respected, to be loved. Dialogue is good. Let's argue, let's talk, but let's not use our women and daughters as punching bag. If you have any suggestions or any comment about this Talkback show today, please do call me on 3220906 or 3220907, or do contact me on my email. Watch our promos for Speak Your Mind for next show. See you next week. Bye.